Bats are often misunderstood, elusive nocturnal creatures shrouded in myth and misconception. But beyond these legends, there is a diverse order of mammals that play crucial roles in ecosystems worldwide. Today, we'll explore the world of bats and the impressive array of adaptations they use to hunt prey and navigate the dark. Researching and working with bats is a number of unique challenges, like working in the dark or traversing cryptic and inaccessible habitats. Our scientists use novel techniques to overcome these hurdles and study bats in the wild.
Most people think about the bat and they think of the bat, and they're always amazed at the diversity of bats that we have. In Alberta alone, we have 9 different species, and most people think we have like one, the bat. When you look around the world, the second largest order of mammals is the bats. The latest count was 1,469 species of bats on the planet. So 1/4 of all mammals on the planet are bats. It's amazing. They're hugely diverse.
What's very interesting about bats is that we do tend to lump them into this category. And I think a lot of it is because we simply don't know enough about them, and the general public doesn't know enough about them. Having said that, we can talk about certain generalizations for bats.
Most bats colony sizes range from maybe 10 or 12 individuals to about 100. Large colonies would be about 1,000.
And we could say the same thing about like diet, for example. It's quite varied as well. Of course, the big one is insects. And here in Canada, for example, all our bats just feed on insects. In the US, they've got additional cool species that are feeding on like nectar and pollen, and because they're actually approaching flowers. So there's a wide variety of bats, and that's probably why there's more than 1,000 species of these of bats across the world. They're all filling different niches and have different ecologies.
Bats are unusual mammals in that they have this small body size, but a large body sized animal's life history strategy. So you can start off with a couple of mice and you can end up with like a ton of mice. So most people don't worry about mice populations because mice can reproduce so quickly. But we worry about grizzly bears because grizzly bears have this long lifespan, but they only produce like 1 or 2 cubs every couple of years, and they don't have this rapid increase in populations. Well, that's the thing that most people are most shocked about with bats, is that they have this long lifespan and slow reproductive rate. So most bats only produce 1 pup a year, and half those pups don't make it through their first winter. Hibernation is really tough. They either don't pick the right place, or they don't get fat enough, and they don't make it through the winter. So bats don't reproduce quickly. So when you lose a population of bats, the population takes a long time to recover. Bats make up for this slow reproductive rate by having a really long lifespan. And we don't have a lot of age records for bats, but a lot of them are 20 years or more. So that's really long for a small mammal to live that long. But it's because they have this slow and low reproductive rate. So that's one of the big conservation concerns that we have with bats, is that when you lose a population, even like a local population, it can take decades or hundreds of years for populations to recover. They're the only mammal with true flapping flight. We have flying squirrels and things like that, but flying squirrels cheat. They just glide. Bats are actual flapping, flying mammals.
Bats in Canada and in the US, for example, they are feeding on insects that are flying around. So now there's this whole other challenge to find food at night. Vision isn't going to cut it. So they are going to use their sound instead. And this is what has evolved over time. It's called echolocation. And that is like location of food by listening for echoes. They produce sound out of their mouth or their nose, that sound goes out, it bounces off an object, whether that's a tree that they don't want to run into, whether that's a little tiny insect that they want to eat. That produces the echo that comes back that they hear with their tremendous hearing capabilities.
They can tell the different sizes of insects in front of them. They can tell the different texture of the insect in front of them. They can estimate how fast it's moving, what direction it's going. There's all sorts of really cool and highly sophisticated adaptations around echolocation.
Bats are difficult to study. For one, of course, they do fly at night. The other problem is that they're very good at hiding. So, and that's obviously an advantage to them, but it does make it very difficult to learn about them. And obviously, if we can't learn about them, it's harder to protect them overall and conserve the multiple species that we know that we have.
You need a specialized piece of equipment to listen for bats. And they're called bat detectors. Yeah, fancy name. But basically, the important part of them is the microphone, and it's a high frequency sensitive microphone.
So if they end up kind of flying in a similar habitat as another bat, as another species, if they're kind of targeting similar sized insects, they're going to produce very similar calls, very similar frequencies and echolocation signals. That becomes a problem because now we end up going, well, that could be this species or this species. So now that brings up the challenge of how we're going to figure out what species is really there. We go out into the areas at night then and try to capture these bats. And that is tricky. Capturing a flying animal that's very smart and who can see at night with both eyes and ears, that is really tricky because they know our mist nets are there. We have to be very creative and figure out how to surprise them.
Sometimes we'll put a numbered band on a bat so that when you recapture them, you know the individual. But we can also, they put a chip under the skin, just like you do with your pets. So a lot of our dogs and cats have, they call pit tags or chips that have like their own little code on them. And we can do the same thing with bats.
The other reason we do that is to look at things like health. Are they reproducing? To start to gather data on various aspects of body size, including accumulation of fat, and there's a lot of information that we can learn about bats when we have them in hand. But when you start to look at at industry in general, bats are worth billions of dollars across North America.
But most of our bats in North America are insect eaters, and they can consume half to their whole weight in insects in a night. So when you start calculating the numbers of bats that we have in North America, it's literally tons and tons of insects that are consumed by bats every night, all summer. So that's really important for ecosystems. It's important for agriculture. It's important for forestry because the bats are consuming all sorts of insects, but they're consuming pest insects as well. They can be important in human health, and that they could be consuming large numbers of mosquitoes that can be carrying viruses that we don't want to encounter. So they're really important in that way. When you start looking around the world, there's a number of bats that are pollinators. So they eat nectar and pollen and broom pollen off themselves, and they transfer pollen from one plant to another. And there's a lot of fruits, tropical fruits especially, that we enjoy that are bat pollinated, that rely on bats. And then in other tropical systems, you have bats that are eating fruit. And unlike birds that will sit in a perch in a tree and eat the fruit and sit there and poop it right in the tree, bats tend to eat the fruit and then they fly off and they poop everywhere. So they're really efficient at seed dispersal. And so they got the nickname of the night gardeners because they're out at night and dropping seeds that then germinate and then help with the reforestation in tropical systems.
When you think of a bat, what comes to mind? Fangs? Vampires? The truth is, bats are one of the most diverse type of animal on the planet. In fact, bats are the largest order of mammals, second only to rodents. These flying mammals call almost every continent their home. From seed dispersers to pollinators to pest control, bats are critical to the health of our planet.